Welcome to Shaping Stories, a glass artist podcast. I am ready. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Doni Hatz, and I'm a scientific glassblower retired. So I'm going into my next phase of going into my artwork that I've been waiting my whole life to do.
I know that you've been doing glass for a very long time, but can we skip the glass part of your life for one moment and can you just talk about what you enjoy outside of glass?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I love flowers. And we grow a big, huge garden every year. And right now we got a huge zinnia garden. I follow the butterflies every day. I'm getting another butterfly. We've got milkweed and the butterfly bushes. So we're bringing on the monarchs. Counted 3 caterpillars this week, monarch caterpillars. It's real exciting. I love the wildlife and growing the garden. We have cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and serranos. And this year we're growing long beans. That's a first. And so they're long Chinese beans and they're really good. We've had such a bumper crop. I'm going taking it to the food bank. It's just too much for us. And they always need fresh produce. And so as a kid growing up, I was sewing, doing macrame, weaving, all kinds of crafty things, and beading. I started making necklaces and jewelry when I was like 8, 9 years old with my girlfriend across the street. So still into that. I have a huge collection of necklaces and beads too. Same thing. Trying to think where I'm going to weave all of this in my artwork between necklaces and jewelry and glass sculptures. Yeah, I don't know where it's going to take me, but I know I have like 100 different projects I want to finish.
And where do you live? And can you tell us where you grew up before that?
I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I live in a suburb about 25 miles outside of town. It's northeast of the city in Loveland, Ohio. I've been here about 32 years. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Was in Portland my whole life, or until I was like 21. And I was going to college and didn't know what I wanted to do. And I took a furnace glassblowing class at Clark College in Vancouver, Washington. And I just was captured by the glass and was going to go up to Seattle and learn up there. Then I heard you could make a living as a scientific glassblower in this one school in New Jersey that specializes in it. I was captured, and 7 months later, I was in New Jersey. And people say, "Oh, aren't you afraid?" And it's like, I went away to college. What's the big deal? It's so funny that people will say that. And then that was it. My life just really, I have a mission. I loved the scientific, and my career took me to New York. My first job out of college was at Union Carbide. That was a great, awesome job in upstream research and development where you made all the specialty glassware. And so it was a great opportunity right out of college to be able to start working with laboratory glassware. And I got to know the scientific glassblowers in New York City because I was just like 30 miles from downtown. Glassblowers from all the other companies and universities in Columbia, New York University, and Queens College, and the Brookhaven National Labs out in Long Island. It just Fisher Scientific. There was only like 30 people in these meetings, and they were all like 40 years older than me. So it was a huge learning experience. It was really great. It was a large German community. Probably 75% of them were from Germany. There was one glass shop, Eck and Krebs, that makes stopcocks and a lot of glassware. And so that's where a lot of those people got their in, coming over from Germany. That was then from New York, and then going to glassblowing conferences. I met somebody that had a job opportunity in Cincinnati in their upstream research. And that's when I moved from New York. So I was in New York about 8 years. I loved it because I moved to Long Island and was at State University of New York at Stony Brook. And the chemistry department was on the 3rd floor. I had a whole east side of the building, floor to ceiling glass windows. It was just, oh, paradise. I loved it. It was a great job. And then I could take classes, one class a semester for free. And so I was able to finish my associate's degree in applied science or scientific glassblowing. Yeah, it's been a great ride.
All right. So when you went to New Jersey, you went to Salem Community College, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about how it was then versus how it is now? It was probably a little different back then.
Oh, yes. When I saw Salem, it's only 3 buildings. When I was reading in the brochures, I didn't have online then at that time. We still were using phones. I used like the student center phone to call him over in New Jersey to try to get into the program. Luckily, he said, yes, we have an opening. When I go out there, I found out that it was 12 seats, 12 people they take every year. And then they have second year students, and there was like 4 or 5 second year students. It was this tiny little room in the bottom of the clubhouse. It was a golf course clubhouse. That was their main community building. And the golf course is still there right behind the building. And then they have two other buildings on the sides with auditorium and traditional kind of stuff. But if I was reading in the brochures about North Campus and South Campus, and I was going to tell my parents, yeah, you're going to have to send out my bike because it's going to have to go across campus while I'm taking all my classes. And it's like, you could throw a rock. It was like, oh my God, it was a big oak tree and then two little buildings. I might have changed my mind if I drove by it. That's the thing. And I'm so glad it worked well. It's hard work. It was practice and get your hands to work and balance and stuff like that. But it comes together.
All the other students, did they have any class experience? And did you find that it was a welcoming community or was it a competitive situation?
There were students from all over the country, actually. It's amazing. So I was from Oregon, another guy was from Washington, one from California, a lady from Wisconsin, another guy from Michigan, New Jersey, New York, and then some locals. We're all there together. We all got along pretty well. There's a couple people that, have some tight personalities. And it was a really great community. It was really nice because it's like homeroom. We had glass blowing from 8 in the morning till noon. You break for lunch, so we did get a 15-minute break at 10. And we're like this little group of people. It was a really nice experience. Everybody was really nice, and I enjoyed it. There's a couple knuckleheads always around. Sometimes, you think about it, we're like a family. We would stay to practice time until 2 o'clock, and then off and on the teacher would allow us until 4 because he didn't stay that long. But at that time, my teacher was Joe Luisi. He was a very proficient scientific glassblower. He had amazing hands, and he was retired from Ace Glass 30 years, and then he came back and taught Salem until I think he must have been 85 or 90.
Did at any point in time did you stop in and think, "Oh my gosh, I'm not made for this," or did you fall in love with the glass right away? And also, did you understand the scientific aspect because you're not only learning glass as a medium, you have to learn this whole other element that makes glasswork so much more challenging, right?
Yes, it was challenging. It was hard, and I think even in the first week, I burned myself. I was pulled a point, and I was doing a constriction, and I tilted the tubing back, and it just like I fried like the tube stuck in my hand like this, So like, oh, I had to run. So the teacher had me soak it underwater for an hour, and so that was my first week. So I found like, yeah, there was different techniques that were difficult, just it's a whole new ballgame to try to get your hands to uh do things, coordinate just lots of little things. But um it's just practice, 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 really. And so, yeah, I felt tapers were a little hard, long skinny tapers to make them just beautifully. Those were difficult. And but that's like, there was just the growing pains, little things, and it depends on how much of a perfectionist you are. And I felt like that's just the way I am. I'm a Virgo. I get really intense in little things. Like the one lady across from me, she was from Wisconsin. She was a chemist. And so she would just do the piece and hand it in. And she didn't care that it was early. And it was the crappiest looking thing in the world. A chemist would not want to use it. So I did. She said, I know it's functional. It doesn't matter because I know how it works. It was unfortunate. You see people have a different way of, beauty, I guess. And she didn't care about beauty in that one. Yeah, I would find different things were challenging because doing ring seals, Luisi had us float them in where you don't have holders to hold the inside tube to keep it from flopping around. And so lots of techniques and tips and tricks that you have to gain from everyone just by watching them. So you got to take a break sometimes, walk around, see what other people are doing, and see you can see how they're trying to problem solve things.
And then
That's
you graduated and you moved to New York. Was that
yeah.
scary?
No, you know what? Everything is like an adventure. It was the same thing when I was coming out to go to Salem. I mean, I didn't know a week before where I was going to live because back then I was calling the local community and trying to find churches. So I thought I'll just go out there a week before and stay in a motel and just have to be on the ground because nobody was helping us through any of the churches. You know, my parents were trying to help. And I mean, it's 3,000 miles from Portland to New Jersey. And it ended up in my furnace glassblowing class the semester before because I quit 6 months before and started working so I could save money to go out to Salem. And ends up one of the other guys in the class also wanted to do the program, but we didn't talk or anything. And so he calls me, no lie, about a week before, and he says, "Oh, Donnie, are you going out to Salem?" I said, "Yeah, I am, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where to stay." And he says, "Oh, I found a travel agent." So we went out there in June and we looked around and we found that lady that's renting 2 rooms, and I got one for you. I'm like, a week before, it was like, oh man, that's awesome because I didn't know what I was going to do. So I felt the magic was happening right away from that passion. I believe it. Passion and interest, it creates that energy to make things happen. And so it did. It worked out great. And it was just about, I just, the only thing I didn't have was a car. So, but it was like a couple miles away, but he had a car, so he was able to drive me to school. Anyways, that was for about a few months. And then I met my uh, future husband several months after that. And so it worked out well. Well, he wasn't anything into glass. He still isn't. He's nothing to do with glass, but he understands me and he supports that. But he's more of an athlete. He was a baseball player while getting to New York. That was by chance. What happened is since Salem was the only school in the area, and it's for people to search out glassblowers, so they always are contacting Salem about different opportunities. And so that's when they had somebody that retired, and so they needed a new person. So they came down and they went around and evaluated all of us, and then they asked me to come up for spring break, and that was in my second year. And so I came up spring break. They put me up in a little dive motel and I worked there for a week. And I felt like you're still pretty slow with your hands in the first couple of years. And Luisi had a different way of teaching where he taught you all kinds of techniques and made all these weird gizmos that don't do anything. So that's what's different. And once you got into industry, you start making the condensers and all the apparatus. And so that was another learning curve, but it was real exciting. I loved it. And so then they offered me the job. Then my next obstacle was to be able to talk my boyfriend into going up to New York because he lived in Delaware his whole life. He never was going to leave. And I had to take the job. And that's what I had to do. And so then luckily they were able to help give me help fund me some money, and I stayed in a Pace University dorm because it was summertime. And so it was really cheap, and I commute down to Delaware. It was like 2 hours drive, so I'd commute down on Friday and then go back up Monday morning. And so I did that for the whole summer until we saved up enough money until I finally got him to pull his roots out of Delaware and New Jersey and got a place. Rented a flat in the house. And so that worked out good. I love that job. I've loved all my jobs. They're just so exciting and the different products and things that everything is applied to.
Tell us like a little bit about what your glassware was going and working towards like during that time period.
So what was really cool is the jobs come through and a lot of it is repairs of glassware, making double manifolds for chemistry. And it immediately immersed in all the laboratory glassware. And my older boss, he was just really kind and gentle it went really well and understood where we're going to get better over time when we keep using our hands. And then also we didn't do any lathe experience, just like one project at school. Nowadays they got all kinds of lathes. They have 10 of them that so that was my first experience working with the glassblowing lathe. That was really fun, because then you start going from just glassware that's 45, 50 millimeter, 2-inch diameter, which is really big then. Now you're going up to 100 millimeter, up to 180 millimeter is the capacity of the lathe was able to take. So We did all kinds of things for Union Carbide, which was really cool because of the products. And so one of the things, they were the inventors of Mufflerite, one of the guys there that they put in mufflers and the molecular sieves, to extract. And they made the molecular sieves for what researchers use, where they want to be able to have a certain size molecule to go through the sieve. So they have the different sizes, porosity of the little tiny balls you wouldn't think about. That was a really cool job that we would have to do for those researchers, because they would be the ones that would have to learn how to make the sieves consistent with a certain size for the certain molecule, if it's oxygen or nitrogen, to go through that. And so they would have these little tiny buckets that were, no lie, about a half-inch diameter, and and they were made out of quartz. And they would break, and they would have to put the bucket on the spring, and so they could measure it from across the room to know how much variant was the molecular sieve working at the right pressure and gas that they were putting through there. And so they would break the springs, and so they would bring it to us, and we'd have to fuse on another little hook. And so that every little thing has like little tiny things that are technical, and then you have big things that are technical, big bell jars, that was a constant challenge. And that back in that day, we worked with mercury, and we had like chemicals that they like ban you from using now. Well, we were definitely using all the safety protection, but yeah, we were using trichloroethane, which is your degreaser. And now they have more like reduced type chemical mixtures, chromate, polychrome. We had a lot of cleaners that we use. So if it's degreasing, or if they really bake something and it's all cruddy, sometimes you have to remake the whole piece. And so, yeah, the Union Carbide was a huge challenging experience. And pretty much then about a year into it, my manager, they offered early retirements. And so then me and the other gentleman that I was working with were like, oh no, he was out of Salem a year behind me. And he's like, wow, we thought we were going to be with him for like 10 years. And, because he's only like 43 or something. And it ends up that he decided to come back. He retired early, and then he came back as a contractor for a year. And for 3 days a week, he taught me and the other gentleman everything that we needed to know for our career at Union Carbide. And so that right there just accelerated it, because we were doing glass to metal seals. We were working with mercury. We were already doing single stage oil diffusion pumps and manometers, barometers, anything. So we worked with mercury, and that before they started and changed the chemistry to go with more instrumentation, just because the technology got better. But it was a really great experience, and really fall back on a lot of that.
What year did you go to Salem, and what year did you move to New York? And also in relevance, I'm thinking, what was the ratio? Like, how much other woman representation was there within the time that you were there?
Ah, yes. Well, so if we I went to Salem in 1983, 83 to 85. And I was just going to go the first year because I didn't know financially my family couldn't help me in getting a student loan. And so I made it through the first year, and then I was able to, then I stayed there through the summer, because if I go back home, I'm not going to be able to make it back. I was able to get a grant and be able to take the next year. So I still had to come up with some money. And so that was huge. So 83 to 85. And then I started Union Carbide right there in the summer of 85. And so I was there for almost 3 years, until I had met Rudy Schlott, that was at State University of New York at Stony Brook. And he was able to, Otmar from Queens College said, Zani, you got to go visit his shop. It's the best shop. And when I did, that's what I was saying, floor to ceiling windows. It used to have 5 glass blowers. So he had his Carlisle bench down at one end, and I had mine, and the other ones just had plants, and one was for tooling hose connections. So it was the dirty bench. So when I went out and visited it, I just fell in love with it. So then I had to spend like 4 months to talk my boyfriend into it. And because I just finally got him up to New York, now to get him to move 115 miles to Long Island. So it took some time, and finally he came around to it. We loved it, because once I was there, I went to the beach every weekend. It was like 15 minutes from my doorstep to the beach, and could go to the North Shore, the South Shore. I loved it. So now is in the amount of women when I first started in my class, so 12 first year, and there's only 2 women. me and another lady, Jean. And then in the second year was four, and there was one girl there, Julie Orlon. Yes, definitely we're definitely the minority, big time. And same thing, I think, even to this day, women scientific glassblowers are still in the minority. Like when I go to the scientific conference, I'm one of just like a handful of maybe 15 out of 80 or something. It's still a disparity. But when we visited like Chem Glass, we got to do some class tours out to Vineland, which is about 45 minutes from Salem. And you would see a lot of women there in their shops, like lathe operators and stuff like that. Like one lady showed us just making U-bends on a lathe and lots of different things. But I think in industry, they have a little bit more women, but at Salem, what I experienced was still very far and few between. Same thing when I go to the scientific conferences. There's just a sprinkling of us girls there.
Do you think that within those jobs that you had, you were treated differently because you were a woman in a good way or a bad way, or just different without having to place a label on it?
Yes, I've gone through all of that. Yeah, there is that. I would, you would immediately call it discrimination, but I think that it's just part of people just getting to know each other, familiarity with each other, because guys know guys more than they know women, so they're more comfortable usually going to guys. So it's the same thing with women. I would say that I felt overlooked and skipped on a lot of different things, but I don't think I felt that all the time at all. I wasn't really despaired like some of my friends have. I think it's because I just wasn't looking at it that way. I was just naive, innocent, or whatever. I wasn't thinking about sexism and discrimination and all that stuff. So I didn't feel and notice it. But I mean, sometimes, yeah, I felt like I was skipped over when teacher would ask other guys to help me do side work jobs, learning things, and it's just a part of that our universe. We it's a part of it that, and I'm not going to let it get me down because I don't need to be around people like that. And so, but sometimes you can't control that in your own work environment. So yeah, I felt very empowered with both of my teachers from at college, as well as at Union Carbide and at Stony Brook. And then when I went to Cincinnati, it was also very supportive. And so that's the huge thing. That's the only way you can grow, and then becoming a member of the Scientific Glassblower Society, because then that's when you start to network and you see the bigger picture of things and learn more about the scientific work and stuff like that. Because you can spend your whole lifetime trying to learn all of this stuff.
So why did you leave the big, beautiful shop in New York?
Oh my gosh, it was a part of one of the economic downturns, and my husband lost his job, and we just bought a house 6 months before. We'd have a car, we have a car payment, and it happened 2 days before Christmas. It was such a nasty thing for them to do that to him. We also, at that same time period, they had a lot of big layoffs from other big tech companies that were just flooding the market with engineers, and he kind of had a disadvantage because he didn't have an engineering degree. And so ends up through the scientific conferences, I met some guy that was in the Cincinnati, and he would call and check on me every so often and say, "Oh, how's it going? Oh, my partner's going to retire next year." And I'm like, "Well, no, I just bought a house. I'm fine, And I'm like, and then he called like 6, 8 months later, and he's like, "Oh, well, so what do you? My partner's getting closer to retiring," and I'm like, "Well, things have changed. I think I might come out and consider the job." It took about 6 months or something like, but I made a trip out there and looked at the facility and had to make the consideration for it. And so then I didn't want to leave Stony Brook because I loved it. I loved it. But my husband was looking for a great opportunity, so he was willing to move, which was so 180 from before, where he was like struggling to get him to come to New York. It took about 6, 8 months. We did it. We made the trip. My boss, my poor boss at the Stony Brook, was so mad at me for like about 5 years. He was so sad, and finally he said, "Okay, I understand." Because then Stony Brook things, it's like what we see today, where a lot of the professors have rely on grants, and a lot of the professors had NIH grants, but also not all of them. There was 30 professors, like 150 grad students. So it was a really thriving place for a scientific glassblower. We made all the liquid nitrogen doors. It was just amazing, everything. It was all the glassware, all the standard glassware. It was like going into a scientific glassware store. You had cabinets just full of everything. How many round bottoms you need? All right, getting low on those. Put that on the list for things to make. But I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. And then you were at this last place up until retirement. Can you talk about what it was like working there and kind of building your career and then preparing to leave? What was work like? Did you just kind of keep it Monday through Friday, 9 to 5?
Yes, yes. So what happened is P&G has two glass shops. And so they had another one that was 20 miles south down in headquarters, kind of, and in Ivordale, and one of the first original glass shops. And so they had two glass floors there and then two in my shop where I had replaced the one guy that retired. We only overlapped like 6 weeks. And so ends up they did this whole, like within 6 months or a year, it was like reorganization design and getting rid of duplication of services. And the other glass shop was under a different management. When we went and visited the glass shop, I think it was about third month I was there, they weren't doing any work, but they had work, but they weren't doing any work. And it was incredibly messy too. 4 months later, they were on the chopping block and they only gave them 2 weeks notice. Said, okay, your jobs, we reassigned you to a different job. So like one glass blower went back into the lab and another one went to storeroom, handling the storeroom. And it ends up that I was the first actually professionally trained scientific glassblower at P&G. Everybody was trained in-house. And then I was trained then by 3 or 4 more other mentors that really helped expand the diversity of the glass that you need to things that you need to know for all kinds of scientific. And but they were at the same time building this new research facility, healthcare research facility, about 20 miles away. We had a glass shop put in there. And that was a fight too, because just sometimes engineers don't know, but all the researchers were going to be moving over to this building, which I then later worked in. I retired. This 3,000 people in the building. The other building I was in was like, I don't know, 1,000 people. But it was more upstream research. So it was very fascinating to be able to do that. But so they have 5 research facilities across the city. And so we did work for all of them. So then customers would just call us up and we would either go down and pick it up or they would come drop it off and same thing, do repairs on glassware or make new stuff. And so that continued to be the process even till this day. Now they've consolidated a couple more of those lab facilities into our healthcare research facility that became the Mason Innovation Center now. And it has almost 4,000 people. And it's going to has 3 pilot plants. They're building the 3rd pilot plant right now. So they're realizing consolidating helps it easier for people traveling, because when you have chemicals that you want to test from one site, then you have 15 miles away, you have to go through all of the chemical management road rules. And so they would have to have all this screening, even if it's just body wash, it's a chemical, or shampoo, it's a chemical. And so same thing we had at one facility where they had on one side of a highway and the other in their little tunnel. And if you wanted to even walk it over, you had to have a hazardous permit. So I was at the one building for 12 years, and then and so the other glass blower within the first 4 years, he then went over and staffed the glass shop in the new building. And it ended up, he retired in 2001 at the last minute, and ended up, I wanted to transfer over there, and then we hired somebody to replace him. That worked out good because I love working in this big, beautiful building. So I would say definitely from how the work was in the very beginning, because we had a pharmaceutical company that they were starting. And so for the whole first, I swear, almost 10 years, we were just building all the double manifolds and all of the reactors and all of the chemistry that they needed, their apparatus that they needed to go with their chemistry, because they probably had must have been about 40 labs. So and they had these community labs where each person had their own bay. So there'd be like 5 of them, and each one would have their own hood and different. So everyone had a double manifold and lots of glassware, separatory funnels. And oh yeah, it was all fun stuff. And so that was a great ride for about 15 years. And they realized how hard it is and how competitive it is to do all this screening to find drugs, and then you have to do trials, and all that's real expensive, clinicals and stuff. And they found that it was too hard to kind of compete with Merck and Pfizer and a bunch of the ones that have been doing it for like 80 years. Yeah, where they have a bigger database. So I was real happy to be able to move into this big, beautiful building in 2001. And then the other guy retired. So then we hired somebody, and that worked out pretty well for a while. And we split up me and the other glassblower would split up the role. So he would do the stuff for people down in the lower half of the city, and I would do the ones for the upper half. He had to leave the company, and we replaced him about like 6, 7 years ago. And so we have a new guy, Kyle Meyer, which is just awesome. Great hand skills and such a nice guy to work with. I would say, what was it in the beginning? Lots and lots of just building the chemistry. And then now it seems like we just maintain it because they have so much excess of the glass. In fact, we've done a couple of donations to universities to help uh, have it go to a good place instead of them trashing it, because that's what they'll do. They just don't know what it's good for. It was hard to leave. I loved my job because the way I worked, I usually would try to interact with people, and then they started to have more like, bring your child to work. And so when they would bring those in, the people would, I would just do fun things for them. You show them something on the lathe and then something on the bench. And I'd vary it every different year of different things. It could be a marble, or it could be just a nice Christmas ornament, usually Christmas ornaments because they're fast and easy to make. Then more researchers, the moms that are with their kids that are fathers that would come into the shop, then they start to see all the creative things. So we started doing a glass display cabinet of all the different types of stuff the researchers are using, that little doohickey things, or it might be something that was off spec, so they didn't like it, but it was one of the practice pieces or prototypes. It seemed like in the last 7, 8 years, we started to get more interest in tours and people coming through. So then they could really see our capabilities. And that's the problem, is really getting a vision of what do they do in there, and make it interesting, and want them to see it, because then they could see where we're helping them in other areas. Because we would also find that we would have customers come to us and they'd say, because of our network of customers all over the city, we can help them make connections with people that were in the fringe of other business units that they weren't familiar with. So I just loved it. I was making connections, and then started doing safety awareness meetings on how to have safety in glassware, meetings on what is the glass lab capabilities. So then they could see we could do plastic coating on glassware so that it's seamless if it breaks or if it's got hazardous chemicals in it. So we're like training the scientists to know how to be safe and use your glassware properly. And so the other guys are going to continue that role. So nowadays it's great. You got PowerPoints, and you could put it up on the screen and give handouts, and so they can know. And then we also started to incorporate a room that had just standard glassware. It was like a recycled area where we could start returning glassware free to the customer. That has also been a good resource for them. So we're always trying to think ahead of how can we help them, let them know that we are available for these needs. And I think that's where the glass blowing display cabinet came in very handy, because then it could say, oh, so you pull it off the shelf and say, oh, you want it like this, but you want a little taller, a little bigger, you want a different fitting. Is it gas, liquid, solid? What do we need to have? Vacuum? Is it going to be positive pressure, negative pressure? So we can know what kind of component parts to use when we're building the glassware. And it just gets more fun when you can learn about more tools and techniques to be able to be a better asset to the company.
And while you're doing all this, you're also participating in like all the Glass Art Society stuff and the American Scientific Society stuff, right? Can you talk about how that all balances out together for you?
There was a process. So I wasn't a member of the Glass Arts Society for a long time, not until in like 1995, which still seems a long time ago for people. But I always loved beading when I was a kid. I loved doing beads and jewelry. And then when I was 15, I started working at a restaurant. And so then I gave my bead collection to my mother. And so then she could do the necklaces. And so I didn't do anything with it until I was like 30, and we just moved out to Cincinnati in Ohio. That I went back home to Oregon and was at Saturday Market, and they have always craft fair and stuff like that on the weekends. This guy, and he says, "Oh, a jeweler," and he said, "Oh, I need some little glass like droplets to have in the middle of like a bell, like in some of his jewelry. So I heard about soft glass, which I knew from furnace working, but I hadn't really been paying attention to that aspect in glass because I just dove so much into scientific. And so he told me about this guy, Mike Franz in Seattle, that sells glass. So I went back home and I bought a bundle of soft glass. And so that was a whole different world working with the soft glass. And when I moved to Cincinnati, I went to the bead store and this lady says, "Oh, I know somebody up in Columbus that teaches glass blowing." And so immediately I signed up for it and it was like 4 months later. And when I went to the class, the owner in the bead shop was right next to me and she said, "Oh, great. Now you can teach at my studio at our bead shop." And so I did that for like 25 years after that, like on weekends. And yeah, like the first year it was like 5 classes, Saturday and Sunday. And we had like 10 people in the class. Usually I say seven is what I like. 6 or 7 is a nice size. That opened up the whole world. And then they just formed the Glass Bead Society. It was the Society of Glass Bead Makers, or today is now ISGB, since International Society of Glass Bead Makers. I started going to the Glass Bead Society meetings. The first one was in '93 in Arizona, because I think it was related to the gem and mineral show that they usually would have. And so that's when the girls were going and selling stuff there. I didn't know anything about that yet, but the Glass Bead Society meeting, and then it was in Mission Bay in San Francisco, and got to meet people and see all this beautiful jewelry that people were making, and it was all soft glass. A few borosilicate workers. Lewis Wilson, I think, was one of the few at the time. And I started teaching more in the soft glass and then learning more about the soft glass, seeing the techniques, going to the Glass Bead Society meetings. So I was doing that every year for probably at least 12 years straight. It wasn't until 1995 that gas was down in Asheville, North Carolina. Sally Prash, she was one of my colleagues from school. She was in when I was in my second year, she was doing her first year with Salem. Even though she had already been trained as a scientific glassblower, she was just getting her degree in it. So she was the one that asked me, told me about going. And so I went down there to that. And then it was like, oh my God, I got to do this one all over again. So that I started, joined that society and then started going to those meetings. And then same with the Glass Bead Society, I started making one of my first artwork pieces was making glass flowers and then putting them inside a bubble. Like here's a piece. There's a perfume bottle one here, but so this has got roses in it, and so I don't like the stopper on this one. I'm going to change it out, but so I started doing those pieces, and then I started doing some demonstrations for the Glass Bead Society, and same thing for gas. And so yeah, it was get a little exposure, teach some more classes here and there, all while I'm still working at P&D. And so yeah, it was I've been riding the wave. I've been having so much fun. Yeah, it's so I've been with ISGB since 1994, gas since 1995, ASGS since my first one was 1986 in Boston. That's a fun story where they have a 4-day program with seminars and all kinds of lectures and demos. And so then they didn't have a hands-on demos yet. That wasn't incorporated in the program. And so they had a big banquet at the end, and they used to have like 300 people that would go to that conference. Like now we just barely are struggling to get 150, and our last conference was only about 80 people. And I think it's definite a reflection of some of the times right now. But yeah, so I'm at this banquet, and there's a little old man and lady with him. My brother was there. I got my brother into scientific, so and he's really good. About 5 years after me, I said, "Come on, try this. 4 years of college. You're starting late." So ended up he's very awesome glassblower. So ends up this old man says, I taught your mother to blow glass. I went, what? What? He said he worked at Tektronix in Portland, Oregon, and his name was Carl Nyman. And I knew my mom worked at Tektronix 25 years, but she never told me that she was pregnant with my brother while she was working on the lathe in the glass shop. And she said, yeah, you had the where you would put the glassware in, and it had a closed system, and you could just push a button, and it had a certain amount of air that would go into it because they were making bulbs and things like that for oscilloscopes. And so it was like, here it is, like almost 10 years, and I'm saying to my mom, it's like, how come you never told me? Oh yeah, Carl Neumann. I was doing, I was like, this is a new story. I heard, I still didn't get all of it out of her, but that was a really neat experience to see that I'm actually a second generation glassblower. But she only did it for a few years. And so then after she was pregnant, had my brother, then they moved her into engineering department and she did other stuff.
Do you think that there's like a push and pull between the scientific and the art glass community, or do you think they coincide pretty well together, or a little bit of both?
There's a community, but gas is so much bigger than like the ASGS and the scientific world that we don't feel like they don't really care about us. It doesn't matter. I mean, it takes time, and they obviously there's more people that are with the whole pipe movement in the artwork world of people embracing it, but not necessarily doing all scientific glass or doing art glass. That's a part of the community, but definitely ASGS, we'd like to do collaborations with them, but I think we're so small, we're not keeping up with the timeline of thinking about it 4 and 5 years out and nurturing that community. It just takes another extra effort. And I'm just focusing on me and trying, coordinating my ASGS and GAS and ISGB meetings. And then there's a few others, just getting to know all the different schools that are teaching furnace that also have flame working. It's just, it never, there's so much to still learn. I'm still energized about it. I would say that yeah, there is a community, but everybody's still kind of focused in their own area. There's an overlap, so it's up to each individual to make those bonds. And so I've tried to cross bridges, and I think it works. It just happens to be, there has to be motivating factor of things. So more close in the city. We've always wanted to try to piggyback maybe on gas. It will help our glass blowers get exposed to what a big organization and the capabilities that we can do. Yeah, so I think there's so many growth areas, definitely, that are not done yet. And so maybe that's what I can help with in the future, but I have to focus on me. So right now I've been on the board of directors for the Glassblower Society for 3 years. I was a past president once in 2000 to 2001. I have the knowledge of the how we've handled things, and I took on a secretary of the board, and so I will be finishing my term like within the next week, and so then I'll be free to finally move on to finishing my glass shop I have here at home. So I've upgraded it with a real ventilation hood, a nice vortex fan. So now I'm just working on building my cupboards and my storage areas and trying to figure out the layout. It's like, now how do I figure out my magical layout that would be ideal? And it's in my head swirling.
So, as of now, you said you're a little over a year from retirement. And can you talk about what you want to do? I know you want to do so many things. So you're trying to set up your home studio so you can start really making your art.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I got so many things I want to do. I'm going to advance into plasma art. And so I've made a few plasma pieces. A long time ago, 1996, I did a life-size Medusa head, and she was exhibited at in St. Petersburg at the GAS when we had the conference at in Tampa. And so St. Petersburg and Clearwater, they had art galleries, and so there was like a whole bunch of us, like Robert Mickelson, Paul Trotman, Sally Prash, Mylan Townsend. There was a whole bunch of us. So it was so much fun to be hanging out with these people, and we'd all be criticizing our artwork and asking lots of questions. And so that was really fun. And so I pushed myself I made this Medusa head kind of like, it was one of those things I noticed is like a shock factor. And so I made her in 1996, and I planned to have her at the conference in Boston, but ended up I was at Wayne Stratman's studio, and he backfilled it with this whole xenon mixture. And then right when I was leaving the class, somebody knocked off the seal off, and so I couldn't exhibit it. I was so disappointed. So then I had to wait a few years until I finally had another opportunity to try to show it at that Pittsburgh thing. So then it like, okay, now I got to get it backfilled and get plasma in it, and then I got to make a stand. Like, it took me just as much time to make a stand as it did to make the piece, because the piece has 19 snake heads on it, and I did like burette tips that go inside the head, so they're really kind of like the Tommy Acid Queen, the syringes in the body. It was an inspiration to make it like that, just as a shock factor. End up my counterpart at Union Carbide moved to Eli Lilly, so he's a scientific glassblower in Indianapolis, which is a couple hours away. So he knew a neon guy. I took the Medusa out there, and we had to build an oven to go around the lady. I got pictures of it all, and it was like fun. We're drinking beers, we putting laying out the brick, putting in the nichrome wire, making the top, waiting for her to cook and backfill her, and got that done. And then it was like, now we got to make a stand for her. So ended up it was a collaboration that we used to have a wood shop at P&G. And so I asked one of the guys if he could help make a stand for her head to slip into, because this was the type of one where it doesn't have an electrode. It's completely sealed off under vacuum. And then I just use that silver conductor tape with the two leads for on the neck of it, and hook it up to a power source, and then it illuminates it. And so he made a wood stand, and I put a little rubber sheeting that it would sit on, and then we screwed on the transformer right there. And then I made a deal with that. My husband's in plastics, so they draped and melted a plastic to go down to her shoulders, and then did a stand on the bottom so it contained the stand and the transformer. And then I had the machine shop guy make part of a structure of her shoulders, and I had to make his wife an orchid flower. And so, it was great. Lots of little trades. So that was a huge learning experience. And so I've only done two sculptures. I did a blue cloud crab sculpture last year at Salem. They said, make your sculpture and have it backfilled. So right now I'm working on a new design that will be for the Corning glass fashion show. Yes, this is going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you anything about it, but that should be really good. Got to keep moving and keep growing. And that's why I knew push myself into the plasma art, because I have the technology to learn and understand it all. So that's what I'm working on, is getting my bench, and I've got pumps. And so I'm working on putting that part together too. Yeah, it's super exciting because that's an unknown part. I don't know enough. So I'm going to have to go take some classes, but I've gotten to meet Amy Lemire and Angie McHale, and there's some of the big artists that are doing some stuff. So what I learned is that if you're making neon signs, you're a tube bender. That's neon, but so when you're doing sculpture, it's called plasma art. And so I was kind of using it as all neon. I'll be a neon artist. No, it's plasma art. I have so many cool things in my mind. So yeah, start playing around with that. Setting up the plasma part of the studio is my growth area, and I'll need to get a bunch of help for that. Yeah, so I'm actually going to have two glass shops. I have one that's the small shop inside my house, which is a walkout. So it's, but I also have a garage that I'm doing the bigger equipment. So I have a larger lathe, because I also do, like this jacketed flower thing that I just showed. I also do larger pieces where I do a bird's nest with eggs, and I put it inside a tube. And then on the outside, I have flowers. And so I've done like prototypes. It's like they're all prototypes. I now want to make a line of each of these things. And so then there's jewelry. So there's really a lot of different areas of going in. So I'm gonna have to be focused on certain projects. And I think a lot of it is just, all of a sudden you want to get into a show and you got to get fired up. So it's getting fired up on an idea that just you put the energy to it without even trying, because you want to figure it out. You want to see it come to life. I think that's the exciting part. Yeah, it's still a
Yeah,
lot of growth there.
it's
Yeah.
so cool.
I know, it's like they got glass beads, and then my yoga teacher wants me to make her angels, and so I've had fun with doing all kinds of variations of angels, and yeah, it's the sky's the limit. It's like, and Sally's always a big inspiration, trying to always push me. She's got a November show. She's okay. Remember November show? Now this year we're gonna do it because you're retired. So I wasn't able to still get a piece done last year either. It is. It's like getting a little bit of information of something I want to do, and then I can put that energy to it a lot faster. Still kind of wide open.
What do you do to kind of get yourself set up in the right mindset to be able to organize and like feel creative? What kind of resets do you do outside of glass and gardening? What do you do in the winter?
What do I do in the winter? Well,
Yoga.
yeah, so yeah, exactly. I do try to make sure I'm centering myself personally. Yeah, I think yoga and exercise, fluid moving your body, and the gardening. I think my folks really, I think in the future, what I'm attracted to is flowers, and trying to make flowers because they're always beautiful for people to they respond to it. I respond to it, and so I think that's what feeds me. And when I was getting ready to make a piece that I made last year for the Sally's November show, and it was I was pushing the limit, and I put 11 flowers into this piece, and they're small flowers like this big, but they were, mainly black eye Susans and purple coneflower, daisies, and then a lot of variations of a whole bunch of other colors of daisies. And so when I put it together, the thing became this big, and it ended up taking me like 12 hours solid blowing glass. And luckily, I went to work early that day, and so I took a vacation day, but I was working. It came out good, but then it had like the green glass has a lot of coefficient expansion issues. And so on the bottom ring seal, it had the slightest little crack. I could able to take pictures of it, but then I did have to cut it open and I fixed the crack, but I haven't finished the bottom of that piece yet. I wanted to do more of those floral pieces, but they're hard and they're labor intensive and it's very stressful. But it's so well worth it when it's done. And plus, I mean, something that not everybody else can do. And I think that's what it is trying to push the threshold. So I think the florals are like what are my passion. I'm always seeing beautiful flowers and taking all kinds of pictures. So when I was doing that piece with all the flowers, I have a perfect picture of a setup where I had to get all my pictures of daisies and black eyed Susans taped all over my wall, and then had my leaves because all the leaves are different for different flowers. And so I made a bunch of leaves, and I could buy every color of green possible because it's amazing how there's the light greens and the dark greens, and roses are a darker green and they have a little red vein in there, and buying every kind of like leaf press there is. It's just like I love tools. And tools are a great thing, and that's what I love between glass bead making as well as in the scientific, is that it's this blending. It's like, oh man, I have so many more tools and techniques and things. And so I feel like there's something more for me to come up with, and I just haven't found out because I haven't just sat there and played. But I found that I do have to be focused when I'm sitting and working on a project, because when I go down there, oh, just play. And it's like, and everybody just turns out like mud. It just doesn't work. I have to get that fire in my belly of an idea. And that then will shoot me out the cannon into this glass shop and get me inspired. But it's frustrating. Like I've had somebody ask me to make them a calla lily, get those, the daughters getting married and stuff like that. And so I've done wedding cake tops, but those as well. The time involved could be 10 hours. And what am I going to get? $100, $200 out of it? That it's something I don't want to sell. I don't want to go into that, So, but it's really fun to make some pieces. But the calla lily, I mean, that made me have I had a challenge. I had to figure this out, and I knew I was going to, and it was really neat. And then last year or 2 years ago, I had a guy come up to me and says, I want to have a bouquet of tulips, at least six. And I want it to sit on the edge of a table, and I want a white bow on the bundle of the flowers. And he wants them to be all different colors. I was really excited and challenged because I hadn't made a tulip before. And so I obsessed about it for like 3 months. Every chance I got, I'm buying new colors. And my coworker at P&G, he would buy knuckles, and you could get thicker colors of colored glass, but they were one-offs, and then doing sleeving of multiple colors, because this guy that asked me to make this chemist that asked me to make these tulips, he wanted a lot of colors that you see in soft glass that we don't have in boro. It was a great learning experience. So I've been working on it now for 2 years, because I'll work on it for like 3 months. And then I'm like, I got to do other things. And so then I've probably made about 20 flowers. They're really cool. So I was making individual petals, just 6 petals on a tulip. And then I just thought the vulnerability of them being there. Like I've learned this even like from other people, like Janice Miltenberger was saying this. She was like, I learned to always do two tacks, two fuses, because too many times they break the piece and you have to send it back to her, and then she has to fix it and ship it. And so that's just that, and that's what it is. You really do have to feel about making it structurally sound, and that's why it's great that people want to do all these little dainty things, but you have to. It depends on how far you want it to last, I guess. Yeah. That's what I found too, is when I'm going to the conferences, I'm learning from so many other people. Never stop learning. I mean, I went to gas this year in Texas, and I went and saw one of the guys that's like 10, 20 years younger than me. I picked up two or three different new techniques, just combining in pieces and aligning things, tips and tricks. That is the way to go when you're around people. Tips and tricks can save you so much more time in investing, go right to it. Because even if it looks easy when they're doing it, there's still some practice involved. The time spent to go to the other conferences is well worth it. And plus, it's making communication connections with people, finding more vendors and for suppliers, expand your horizon of different things, because gas has got so much with lecture series, and then you got your hands-on, their demos. And so a lot of times what's great is going to the furnace studio demos, because we're still crossing over. There's doing a lot more kind of flame working tape, and the torches that's being incorporated more into their studios. It has been for several years. Always more things to cross over and learn from them to incorporate in my work. So that's why I have to get out. You have to get out of the shop and see people, and continually make connections, because it just can save you a lot of time and agony for different projects, and just the joy of meeting other people like minded.
And we went through all my questions, and I know you just did a whole bunch of really good, thoughtful things, but do you have final words of wisdom that you would want to share?
Well, yes, I definitely, you forgot to get out of your area, connect with others. And that's where I just found the conferences are just indispensable. Just the camaraderie, but just helpful hints and techniques and new tools. And it's getting down to, because it's sure we can learn about the glass, but then you got to learn about your hardware. You got your torches and your tanks and regulators, and you got to clean them. And so many years, you got to find suppliers to help maintain these things and make some manifolds for them. So much of the backbone of uh, building a nice, safe shop is highly important as well. I would say just you have to get out there and meet others, because it really does expand your horizon, and you realize, you think you're the only one that knows that technique, and it's like, no, it's out there. It's just a matter of, maybe it can be pulled off a lot better. You can make it a lot better, or they have tips and tricks. And so I think that's what it is. It's time saving things that I learned from other people. And so I would find a lot of times you would be at the bar on the cocktail napkin getting more key learnings from that than being in a seminar for a whole 4 hours on doing computation of the formula of glass or something. So, but it's still good to know that you still got to hear it once, and then you can always find, because the more you go and take classes and learn and is expanding, then you can find where you really have a natural affinity towards that, and that means you something you have to explore. So it is a part of following your feelings, but you do have to break out of your comfort zone and try things, because that's what I found with glass. It's not always, you're not going to get it on the first time. You got to keep practicing, or is it going to, some you can get it on the right, but then you come back like a week later, can you do the same thing? What did I do different? How come that's not working out the same? It's practice makes perfect. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's a community too, because you have to get energized, because it's so easy to just get stuck in your own head. And sometimes that's what it is. You need to get out and get some fresh air. So yeah, I would say create a community of people like-minded, and that you can bounce things off and continue to learn and grow.
Thank you so much for listening to Shaping Stories. If you like our podcast, please make sure to follow on whatever platform you're listening on. We are always grateful for your reviews to help other artists find us. You can find us on Shaping Stories Pod on Facebook and Instagram. And please make sure to support this artist that we interviewed today. It's a lot of guts to come on here, and we appreciate them being vulnerable and sharing, and especially for their very valuable time. If you know somebody that might like to be interviewed, or you might like to be interviewed yourself, I would love that. Please send an email over to me to dom@terrapinglass.com. I really look forward to seeing you, and I can't wait to continue with this project.